Hello, happy to be back with you on YouTube. I hope you're all having a lovely day. For my first of, I hope, many videos, today I wanted to talk to you about the essential tools that you might need if you're looking to start your journey in jewellery making. Now, I've got a couple of different things to talk to you about, some of which I'm not as expert in as others. So my primary love as a jewellery maker is wire and wire working. So I'm going to just take you through some of the tools that you would need to get started, and then some that you can kind of add in as time goes by if you find that this is something that you fall in love with like I did. Now, my most favourite tool of all time are my sparkle-handed bent chain nose pliers. Now, a chain nose plier is one that tapers towards the tip but has flat surfaces on the inside. So you can see the inside surfaces there are completely flat, where you pinch the material, and then these ones, they curve around and taper to a relatively fine point. Now, another variation of these is a slightly longer handled and longer tipped version with quite a fine point. Now, you can get these in needle nose variations as well, and what these enable you to do is to get right into the heart of a piece of jewellery. If you needed to kind of just squoosh down and smooth a section of wire that's already well within the heart of a design, you are definitely going to need some kind of fine tipped chain nose pliers. I find that the bent tip ones are the best, but people do get on really well with the straight tipped ones as well. So one of those, absolute essential, and probably one of your first purchases. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about is a good quality cutter. Now, these are beadle-on pliers, but Xuron are also rather excellent. And what a flush cutter gives you is just what we're talking about. So your wire comes in through the end, and where you trim it, you get a beautiful flat surface. And if you take a closer look, you can see that they meet beautifully. They don't cross over, and you'll end up with one surface which is incredibly flat. Now, if you're making ear posts or wires to go through the ears, then something that you might need is a burr cup device, which I've just lost. I had it here a second ago, but that's gone walkabout. And with that, you can pop it over the end of the cut wire and just chamfer the edges round, and it gives it a little bit of a polish, and it means that if you do insert that into a piercing, it's not going to drag or cut any of the skin. One of my next most essential pliers are my very basic round nose pliers, so called, as you can see, because the actual ends of them are quite rounded, and with this you can start loops on designs and coils and swirls, and they're really beautiful to work with. Now, all of my pliers tend to have these box joints, which means that when you open and close them, they're really stable. If they have a joint in the section which isn't completely flush to each section, it can wobble about as you use them. So a nice little box joint like that, and these were desperately inexpensive, so if you're looking to get started, a basic round nose plier is an absolute essential. These are my flat facing pliers, and these are the same distance from the joint to the tip, which means that if I wanted to make, say, castellations or prongs, I can utilise this and actually make use of that dimension in between the prongs, and I will go through videos as time passes showing you how to make the perfect dimension prong setting, and I'll probably bring these out to play with when we do that. Another one of my go-to tools with wire work are stepped bail makers. Now, they come in various fashions. These are stepped. You've got 3 different sizes on one side, and on the other side here we've got this silicone or a softer plastic, nylon maybe, and what that does is that just protects the rear surface of the wire as you're forming around it. Now, if you're making a bail for a pendant at the top, so where the chain would go through, or the ribbon or the cord or whatever you're planning to use, then you can have one tool to do 3 different sizes, which is really handy. Bail makers come in many different fashions. Some are the same on both sides, and I've got a pair here which are teeny tiny, so these make very small little central holes or loops to begin with, but you can get them where they're different sizes, so you've got 2 on one, these are 3 on one. You can even purchase 6 size bail makers in one tool, which is really handy if you're travelling around to just have the one tool and be able to do 6 dimensions. Another tool which I like to keep handy, and this is the bracelet form. I have them also in a ring form, and these are the smiley pliers. Now, these are nylon facing, and you would utilise these to make, I have a piece of jewellery that I used these on actually. which is a bar back bracelet with hand-formed chain. So you could utilise these to create that beautiful curve in the metalwork. You can also use it on wirework if you're looking to make a bangle or a section of bangle. They give you that lovely smooth shape, which actually it's quite tricky to have forming quite naturally. So a pair of pliers to do that, and as I say, they also come in a ring size, which you probably guessed it is useful for making rings with. Another toolbox essential is a mandrel. Now, these often come in stainless steel, which you can actually hammer on, but I tend to carry a wooden one with me because it's super lightweight, and if you're dragging around a lot of tools with you, having one that doesn't weigh an absolute ton is really handy. However, what this doesn't do is give you the individual sizes. Now, I don't have my other mandrel to hand at the moment, but that will come with ring sizes on it. So if you're creating to commission and somebody has suggested that you need a size M, well, I know that that little dimple there is actually a size M, and you could obviously use a permanent marker if you wanted to put those on and still have the beauty of a lightweight tool. So that's another thing that's really handy to have. This is my marker pen, which goes everywhere with me because you can utilise that to mark on your wire. You can utilise it to temporarily mark on your tools. If you're working, for instance, with a tapering chain nose plier, but you want to have an exact dimension to use over and over again, then just putting a little notch on with your marker pen. You can take that off later with an alcohol wipe or with a nail varnish remover, for instance. Something like that will take that away quite easily. Those are my wire working essential tools. Now, I'm not known for my metalwork, but I do enjoy smashing plates of metal when I'm at home. So one thing I will show you is a tool or two which are really useful. And to give you some kind of context, this is the kind of jewellery that you can make very, very easily with very little metalworking knowledge and experience. So this is formed from raw 1.25mm gauge copper wire and raw sheet copper. And I'll show you the tools that you would need to take on a project like this, and I'll take you through that at another point in time as well, I hope. So for instance, you would start off with a sheet of metal. So there are certain things that you will need to do to this. Obviously, one of them is get my smutty fingerprints off it. But to turn this into a usable piece of jewellery, I tend to take it in chunks, take it in bite-sized formats. And the first thing that I would want to do is to cut that to size. So if I want to have just a little piece of metal to work with, and I've got some sheet brass here, the first thing I'd want to do is to achieve that sort of shape and dimension so that I can take that further if I'm going to make that into a ring or if I'm going to make that into a cuff, having an elongated piece. So we need to cut your sheet, and there are two primary ways that I cut sheet metal, which I will show you in just a second. What I will show you is what I tend to work with is a steel rule and a scorer. Now these have different names. Sometimes they're called a scribe. This is a dual scribe, so you've got a straight point and a bent point, and you would use your marker pen that you had out earlier, measure from one end. So let's say that we're going to make a centimetre strip to go on the back of a bangle. I'm going to measure a centimetre in at the top and at the bottom, make a very fine line with my marker pen, and then I'm going to lay the ruler over the top, make sure that that's perfectly aligned on a flat surface. I'm then going to score that 2 or 3 times with my scribe to make sure I've got a nice line to work to. Once I've got that line to work to, there are 2 ways that I can cut my metal. I can either use a saw blade. Now this is a box frame, and you need that to be quite tense to work. Not everybody gets on with saws, so a lovely alternative to your saw blade is a cutter of some description, shears. So these are my basic shears, which I actually really love working with. They're super sharp. If they do start to go blunt, I tend to just cut some tin foil with them, and that makes it just a little bit sharper and brings them back to their former glory. So that's one way. These are also my professional cutting shears, which have a safety blade and a return handle on them. So if you're going to be doing a lot of cutting, you can also use these for wires up to about probably 1.5mm gauge. There's also a little notch to enable you to do that as well, but you can use them for wire as well. But they're really lovely to work with, and they are less exhausting because obviously half of the work is done for you. So that's how you would cut your metal. You can then also use a wet and dry sandpaper, such as something like this, to take those edges to a smooth surface. So you would want to apply that just to bring them so you don't hurt yourself when you're handling the metal. And something which I found invaluable, which was a little bit, I'll be honest, a little bit of an investment, is my file, which is, I think this is a 4-0, which I utilise for my silver work, and that is a one directional only, and you've got a curved side if you need to take it smooth on the inside, and a flat side. You would always work in the one direction. Obviously, as I say, I'm not an expert in metal smithing, but I do like to have a dabble at home, and I'll happily take any questions, and if I can answer them, brilliant. If not, I can only apologise. Another couple of tools which are really essential for working with metal: your steel block. Now, one of these I will use for hammering if I'm going to put some lettering or work utilising stamps. I've got some really lovely fun stamps at the moment. So I would use one for my silver, one for my copper and brass, and then I would have a third one available for just smashing things on. So this is my smashing block, and because my neighbour is a writer and his office is literally just there next door to mine, I obviously don't want to be too noisy, so I have a hard rubber block underneath to take some of that echoey vibration and noise that comes through when you are hammering. Hammers, again, are another tool that you'll need if you want to manipulate your metal, and you can have hammers. I've just got this one behind you. Now, this is the Multiphase Hammer, which you can see will give you lots of different ways of texturing metal, and these heads unscrew, and you can have different plates popped in, just having the one tool and a very, very lightweight plate to use. You can also achieve some wonderful textures just using a brass-faced hammer. Now, I've had this hammer for maybe 9 years, and I adore it. You've got a vinyl or a plastic head on one side, which enables you to not be so damaging if you're working with a plated metal, for instance, and then my brass head on the other side, which I clean between uses. Because I love this hammer, I will use it for both silver and copper, but I'll make sure that that's completely clean before I transfer it between them. The reason I bring that up is if you are going to be working in a sterling or a fine silver and you send that away to assay, if you have even a trace of copper and that happens to be the section that is tested, your item can be rejected as not being sterling or fine silver, and it will cost you money to take it home, clean it and send it back in again. So if you are able to, if you're advancing in your jewellery making, then do consider a set for your precious and a set for your non-precious. I am not the world's greatest soldering artist, but something that I found useful for both soldering, as you can see, because it's got a burnt end to it, and also general projects where I need a little bit of help, are my reverse action pliers. Now, these come in a bent tip, a straight tip, and they can come quite elongated or quite short. These are my favourite pair. They tend to go everywhere with me. They're really useful if I need to pop something down. Again, I'm not a chainmail artist, but I do like to dabble with a few different bits and pieces here and there. If I need to just put that down for a second and run away, answer the door or see to the dogs or whatever, then these are really, really handy. There are also some links when you're creating with chainmail where you wish you had an extra hand and it had really fine little fingertips on, so there you go. Another couple of tools for wire which are absolutely invaluable are my wire straightener tool, which is 3 little barrels there, and they are connected, and you would pop your wire through straight underneath the top one and above the top two, flatten that down and draw your wire through, or even send it into a reverse angle, draw the wire through. Now, the effects of this are twofold. If your wire is a bit crinkly, it becomes much smoother, and if you're working with a 0.8 wire but you want it to be as strong as a 1mm wire, then a couple of passes through your straightener tool acts as a strengthener because it pre-work hardens it. Wire is a medium which will respect you if you respect it. So with your wire, don't over work harden it before you use it, because it can become brittle, especially as you're going to be working it as you go through. Another wire tool which I absolutely love is the Crinkling Machine. Now, you have heads like this which are very, very spiky and crinkly, and we will be coming to that in another demonstration very near in the future. And that gives you lovely little peaks and troughs which are very, very even. They're evenly spaced, even heights, and that's brilliant for so many jewellery making designs that I've used myself and developed over the years. Another little wire tool is the twister, which is fantastic. You've got a little head on the end which has got 5 apertures in it. So what you could do if you wanted to is put 4 different coloured wires. I actually use a table leg in my living room, tie the wires around the other end, and then you hold on to this sleeve that sits on the middle which rotates, twist that up, and you can get a really nice, lovely home twisted piece of wire. And I find it easier to use than the pliers that do the twisting for you. That's just personal preference. Another tool, very, very quickly, is the little free handy Andy. They've got different names. This is a bit dusty because I've not given it much love and attention of late, but you can angle this however you desire. It's so useful for intricate work, again for your chainmail or chain building, and absolutely fantastic if you're soldering into the middle of a piece of chain and you just need that tension right to allow you to get in there, but you don't want to have that touching obviously anything quite flammable. If you're going to venture into soldering, I very strongly recommend getting a non-asbestos heat mat, such as one of these. And you can solder on that. You can also put it under blocks if you're soldering into a wig, which is like a squishy kind of thing. We'll probably find a more technical word for that. So my last tool that I want to show you today is a bracelet mandrel. Now these come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. I've got an oval one, but this is my round one. It's the one I use most, and it's absolutely fantastic for obviously making bangles. You can size around it, you can hammer on them if you want to, but the steel ones are better to kind of take the blow, and they will obviously last through that a little bit more strongly. But it is a really handy tool if you've not got a tin of beans to hand, which is always a useful thing to have, but you might not always have it on your workbench. So that's one of my favourite pieces of jewellery. It's just got some random gemstones, some leftover bits and bobs, and I do like to wear that. It's really comfortable. That's my general introduction to tools that you might need, and hopefully very soon I shall have myself an overhead camera, and once I get the overhead camera I'm going to be able to start doing you proper demos. At the moment, allow me to demonstrate. It's a bit wibbly wobbly, isn't it? You don't want that because you'll all need some kind of anti-sickness drug to watch. Let me just steady that. It's been lovely talking to you today. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful day, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Bye!